Thank you, Sam. I want to start by asking this question. What does it mean to leave no one behind when we talk about freedom? Is it only about being free from the yoke of labor and sexual exploitation, or is it about something more? Capacity is freedom, says Amartya Sen, but there are, however, sources of unfreedom as well, unfreedoms that deny us a certain set of opportunities or alternatives from which to choose, leaving thousands exposed to desperation and to a universe of risks. I want to talk about two specific cases in which we have worked in the last years, in two very different phases of social reintegration. Mario and his brother Enrique were child and women traffickers for which they spent 12 years in jail. Making unbelievers believe, today they speak openly about what they did and how they did it. It took place in the area of La Merced, in the center of Mexico City, where they had grown up watching their own mother deal with different exploitators throughout their lives. Mario wasn't always a trafficker, a human trafficker. He was thought. And there are two things that I want to recover today from his testimony. The first one is the fact that when he speaks about what he did and how he did it, is that he actually is conscious and he recognizes the damage that he had on his victims. Being led into their world, something that honestly really shocked me was the clarity in which Mario explained the violent process that he would use to break emotionally and physically his victims. The second thing that I want to bring forward is the fact that knowing the damage that he had on his victims, he can elaborate why, knowing the harm he was doing, he did it regardless. I remember he even did this. He said hunger. He said poverty. He said violence. A logic of survival of the strongest is just the logic of either being devoured or devouring someone else. And I will quote him. He said, "I do not know when I became this. I just know the moment when I became violent for me. It was that moment when I stopped being a victim. And I did the same for my brothers, and I converted them from victims to perpetrators." Why I find it relevant to entertain this logic is because I want to make the point that, although there are no justifications for what they did because they genuinely did terrible things, there are social, economic, and cultural logics to what human trafficking is that cannot be ignored if we want to start having a conversation about human trafficking and exploitation. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such strong patterns in the world of how it's happening. In my country, teenagers in areas of great vulnerability are many times faced with little alternatives that, in a way, do force them into terrible paths, and their most attractive option is becoming a child sicario or a human trafficker. Taking this into account, isn't Mario a product of the system as well? Isn't he a product of his own unfreedoms? In 2014, Sundari arrived to the shelter after having been held victim of labor exploitation for 5 years in a dry cleaner in Mexico City. The conditions in which her trafficker, a woman named Leticia, I want you to remember this name, Leticia, held her were inhuman to such a degree that her body underdeveloped. She suffered severe anemia and malnutrition. Her height had decreased almost 25 centimeters. Being a 22-year-old woman, she looked like a 14-year-old girl in her physical appearance. According to the medical report, she was covered with more than 600 wounds, and her internal organs had damage of an 81-year-old woman. After her legal complaint, 5 people were sentenced to jail. A mother, a father, and 2 daughters. Are you listening to this? It's a whole family that actually participated in having a person, a human life, under these conditions. What really shocked me is that after listening to this story many times, one day I came to a realization, and it was that no one had taught this family how to do this. And if you literally compare the modus operandi that the Garfia's brothers had on how to dehumanize and exploit their victims, how to break them, it was exactly the same. And the difference was that to Leticia and her family, they hadn't been part of a community in south of Tlaxcala where it was normalized They hadn't been taught like Mario how to do it, but they knew how to do it. Why? How did they learn? How did they go from being good and normal people, from receiving someone in their house, to actually having someone chained to their neck with a 3-meter-long chain? During these 6 years, I've observed the importance of processes. I've seen, 1, the gradual process in which a person becomes a victim to the point in which they accept their own exploitation, in which they consent to what is happening to them. I've also seen the process in which Mario learned how to kill the feeling so that he would be able to perform his job. And I've also seen the process in which Leticia and her family convinced themselves that they had reasons enough to do what they did. When this dawned on me, I felt scared. If anything this case about Sunduri has taught me is that we have a terrible capacity to do things and to convince ourselves for the reasons while we are doing those things. Step by step, threshold by threshold, violent limits are crossed with the very rational ideas behind them. And I just want to remember that both slavery and the Holocaust were legal in its moment. Having said this, my larger question is, if we have the capacity to do these horrible and terrible things, to take life away like this, can we maybe be equally capable of giving life back? Can we create a process of positive capacity? You know, in my work in SINTRATA, we do not pretend the impossible. There are many limits to the timely economic and human resources that we possess. However, we do believe that with enough creativity, we can draw concrete ways and design these thresholds to also bring this other type of capacity into the game, to promote the acquisition of very specific skills, habits, and attitudes towards the resolution of shared problems. What we do is that throughout different methodologies and projects, we work with small and medium-scale groups. From schoolyards to university campuses, we have inaugurated a series of projects that aim to create capacity in new generations, teachers, and parents. For example, one of the new projects that we're launching soon, which I'm really excited about, is called Operación Mi Comunidad, and will be dedicated to 3 municipalities in Mexico City that have been studied and that are seriously exposed to so many risks. We want to promote a whole set of soft skills and networks to bring more security in. With this, I want to conclude. This I have learned. Processes are important. They need to be made and experimented with. That is what social entrepreneurship is actually all about. It's about, 1, making educated guesses, testing them, learning from them, and then surviving that frustration. I do not come here to present one unique model as I did last year. I have accepted that there will be a constant flow of ideas and plans needed throughout this whole path. And I want to close by saying that in my work, with all of the things that we're exposed to, really, these terrible things, and we were talking about it the other day, sometimes I finish work and I feel it in my hands, I feel it in my throat, I feel it in my stomach. The things that are happening in our world are unbelievable. But the only reason that why I'm able to sustain any kind of great expectation is because I've also seen the beauty of human capacity, of this other side that actually can give life back. Creating capacity is freedom. And I'm convinced that threshold by threshold, we can change the order of things, and perhaps maybe we can start to invert that cycle and make it virtuous. It is the liberty of being able to take control of one's own life. That we may not only make good programs that we can implement, but stronger individuals and communities to share the responsibility of those programs with. For the freedom of children to be able to choose a good future. For the freedom of blinding desperation and the freedom of fear our want. This is for me what it means to leave no one behind. Thank you very much, Monsignor Sanchez Orondo, Dr. Betsy Parker, Professor Sachs, and Sam, everyone who has invested in us, because in a way you are creating capacity. So thank you for that trust, and really it's such a great honor to be here with all of you. Thank you very much.